Imagine holding a book that everyone tells you is the complete word of the Creator, but then you discover there are hidden chapters, locked vaults, and ancient scrolls that were intentionally left out by men in silver robes centuries ago. We are talking about prophecies so intense, so vivid, and so disruptive to the established order that early church councils decided you weren't allowed to read them. These aren't just footnotes. These are cosmic visions of the end of time, the nature of the celestial realms, and the secrets of the beginning of the world that were deemed too dangerous for the public. Today, we are breaking the seal on the banned prophecies. We are going beyond the standard 66 books to explore the writings of Enoch, the secrets of the Gnostics, and the apocalyptic visions that were tucked away in caves for nearly 2,000 years. If you've ever felt like there was a piece of the puzzle missing from your understanding of spiritual history, this is the moment those pieces click into place. To understand why a prophecy gets banned, you have to understand the power of the people who do the banning. In the 4th century, the Roman Empire and the early church leaders were trying to create a unified system. They wanted a book that was easy to manage and didn't spark too many questions about the celestial hierarchy. But before that unification, the Library of Faith was massive. One of the most famous examples of a banned book is the Book of Enoch. For centuries, this text was considered essential. It is even quoted in the New Testament book of Jude, but eventually it was pushed to the margins. Why? Because Enoch talks about things that make people in power very uncomfortable. According to Enoch, these beings didn't just bring spiritual rebellion, they brought the secrets of metallurgy, the making of weapons, the art of cosmetics, and the observation of the stars. It's a prophecy that suggests that human technology and vanity have origins that are tied to a cosmic transgression. This was too wild for the early councils. They wanted a simpler story of human choice. But the Book of Enoch survived in Ethiopia, preserved by a faithful community that refused to let the fire of these visions go out. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in the 1940s, guess what was among them? Multiple copies of Enoch. It turns out, the banned prophecy was exactly what the ancient people were reading to understand the spiritual warfare happening around them. Enoch's vision of the future wasn't just about the past. It was a blueprint for the final judgment. He describes a Son of Man who sits on a throne of glory, a figure who exists before the sun and the stars were created. This prophecy was so influential that it shaped how the early followers of the Messiah viewed the divine. If you want to understand the deep, mystical roots of the faith, you have to look at what Enoch saw in those heavenly travels. He wasn't just looking at the stars, he was looking at the machinery of the universe and the inevitable conclusion of the struggle between light and darkness. But Enoch isn't the only one. Let's talk about the Apocalypse of Peter. In the early church, this book was a serious contender for the New Testament. It was read in churches alongside the Gospels. It contains a terrifyingly detailed prophecy of the afterlife and the consequences of one's actions on earth. While the book of Revelation, which did make it into the Bible, uses symbolic language like dragons and bowls of wrath, the Apocalypse of Peter is much more literal. It describes a landscape where the punishment perfectly matches the transgression. Why was it banned? Some historians suggest it was simply too graphic. It focused so much on the consequences of wrongdoing that it overshadowed the message of grace that the early church leaders wanted to emphasize. They felt that if the congregation was too focused on the vivid images of justice in the afterlife, they might lose sight of the transformative power of love in the present. It's a fascinating look at how religious marketing, for lack of a better word, influenced what you see in your leather-bound Bible today. By excluding Peter's apocalypse, the church moved toward a more allegorical view of the end times, leaving the literal fire and brimstone to the fringes. Then we have the Gnostic texts, discovered in a clay jar at Nag Hammadi in Egypt in 1945. These are perhaps the most banned of all because they present a completely different prophecy of the human soul. The Gospel of Thomas and the secret revelations of John suggest that the physical world is a kind of beautiful trap created by a lesser being, and that the true creator is a light far beyond this realm. The prophecy in these books isn't about the end of the world in terms of fire and earth. It's about the end of the world through the awakening of the individual. To the early church fathers like Irenaeus, this was the ultimate heresy. They called these books the spawn of the serpent. The prophecy that you have a spark of the divine within you that doesn't need a middleman or an earthly institution to reach the Creator was a direct threat to the growing hierarchy of the church. If everyone could have a direct prophetic revelation of the light, why would they need to follow a centralized authority? So, The order went out to find these books and destroy them. Fortunately, some brave soul buried them in a jar in the desert, waiting for a generation that was ready to ask deeper questions. Let's move to the Shepherd of Hermas. This was a hugely popular book in the 2nd and 3rd centuries. It's a series of visions given to a former slave in Rome. The prophecies are about the building of a great tower, which represents the spiritual community. Hermas is shown that the tower is made of living stones, but some stones are rejected because they have cracks or aren't the right shape. It's a prophecy of spiritual merit and the constant opportunity for change. The reason the Shepherd of Hermas was eventually moved to the Apocrypha, or the banned list, wasn't because it was offensive, but because it was seen as too recent. The councils wanted books that were tied directly to the first apostles. Hermas was seen as a later writer, but for the people of the time, his visions were a vital source of encouragement. They saw the tower not as a building, but as a cosmic project that they were part of. When you read Hermas today, you see a much more practical, day-to-day prophetic guidance that focuses on personal integrity and the health of the community. It's much less about the end is near and more about the light is here. How are you living in it? We also have to look at the Odes of Solomon. These are beautiful, prophetic poems that read like a lost book of Psalms. They are filled with imagery of the Spirit flowing like a river, and the believer being crowned with a wreath of truth. These prophecies emphasize a mystical union with the divine that feels very different from the structured, legalistic tone that some parts of the Bible can take. They were likely excluded because they were too poetic and open to interpretation. The councils wanted clarity and doctrine. The odes offered mystery and song. By banning these, the church lost a bit of its heartbeat, moving from the songs of the heart to the rules of the mind. One of the most intense banned prophecies comes from the 2nd book of Esdras, also known as 4 Ezra. This book is actually found in some older versions of the Bible, like the original King James, but was later removed from the standard Protestant version. Ezra has 7 visions where he questions the Creator about the suffering of the righteous and the prosperity of the ungodly. The answers he receives are some of the most profound prophetic explanations of the delay of justice. The prophecy of the eagle in 2 Esdras is particularly fascinating, only to be rebuked by a lion who represents the Anointed One. Many modern readers look at this and see a prophecy of the rise and fall of empires, from Rome to modern superpowers. It's a political prophecy wrapped in celestial imagery. It was likely sidelined because Ezra's questioning was too bold. He stands before the divine and essentially asks, "Is this fair?" The councils preferred prophets who were a bit more compliant, but Ezra remains the voice of the person who wants to understand the why behind the what. Now, let's talk about the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. While not a prophecy in the sense of predicting the future, it contains a prophetic description of the soul's journey after it leaves the physical body. It describes the powers that try to stop the soul and how the soul must overcome them with knowledge and inner peace. This was a prophecy of the internal world. It was banned not just because it gave a prominent role to a woman, but because it suggested that the real battle isn't with earthly armies, but with the shadows within our own consciousness. This internal prophecy was deemed too mystical for a church that was trying to build an earthly empire. They wanted people looking at the cross on the wall, not the light within their own hearts. But why does this matter to us today? Why should someone interested in history or faith care about dusty old books that didn't make the cut? Because when you read the banned prophecies, the landscape of the Bible suddenly becomes much larger. You start to see that the themes of the New Testament, the struggle with spiritual entities, the hope for a new heaven and a new earth, and the mystery of the divine nature, weren't invented in a vacuum. They were part of a massive, vibrant conversation that was happening 2,000 years ago. The Book of Enoch, for instance, provides the missing link for understanding why the world is in the state it's in. While Genesis gives us a short version of the fall of man, Enoch gives us the cosmic version of the interference of celestial beings. It explains why the ancient world was obsessed with giants and men of renown. When you put the prophecy of Enoch back into the narrative, the flood story in Genesis suddenly makes a lot more sense. It wasn't just about human bad behavior. It was about a biological and spiritual contamination of the earth. By banning Enoch, that context was lost, leaving generations of readers scratching their heads about the details of the ancient world. Similarly, the Gospel of Nicodemus, also known as the Acts of Pilate, contains a section called the Harrowing of Hell. This is a prophetic account of what happened in the spiritual realm between the Friday of the crucifixion and the Sunday of the resurrection. It describes the gates of the shadows being broken down and the captives being led into the light. It's a powerful, triumphant prophecy that has inspired some of the greatest art and literature in history. It was left out of the Bible because it was seen as overly dramatic and perhaps a bit too speculative. But for a believer, this banned prophecy fills in the most important 3 days in history with a vision of absolute victory over the darkness. It transforms a moment of apparent defeat into a cosmic rescue mission. We also have the Sibylline oracles. These are a strange collection of prophecies that claim to be the words of the Sibyls, ancient prophetesses from the pagan world, who were actually predicting the coming of the Messiah. The early church loved these because they could use them to convert people from the Roman and Greek religions. Look, they would say, even your own prophets saw this coming. However, they wanted a faith that was purely biblical and didn't rely on pagan sources, so the Sibylline prophecies were shelved. But they remain a testament to the idea that the light was shining in many places, not just in one small corner of the world. Then there is the Proto-Evangelium of James. This is a prophecy of the beginning, detailing the childhood of Mary and the miraculous nature of her life. Much of what people traditionally believe about Mary today, details not found in the four Gospels, comes from this book. It was banned from the official canon because again it was seen as too legendary. But the prophecy within it is about the preparation of a vessel for the divine. It shows that the plan wasn't a last-minute decision, but a centuries-long preparation involving multiple generations of faithful people. It adds a layer of depth to the Christmas story that the standard Gospels only hint at. Let's consider the apocalypse of Abraham. This text describes Abraham being taken up into the heavens in a chariot and shown the entire history of his descendants. He sees the destruction of the temple and the eventual restoration of his people. The most chilling part of this prophetic vision is the end of the world section, which describes 10 plagues that will hit the earth in the final days. These aren't just the literal plagues of Egypt, but spiritual plagues, confusion, madness, and the collapse of truth. It's a prophecy that feels remarkably relevant today. It was likely excluded because the imagery was too complex and the focus on the specific history of the Hebrew people was seen as less universal for a global Roman church. The banning of these books created a sanitized version of the spiritual world. By removing the detailed accounts of celestial beings, heavenly journeys, and internal transformations, the councils made the faith more about believing a set of doctrines rather than experiencing a spiritual reality. The banned prophecies are the record of that discarded experience. They are the field notes of people who were trying to map the unseen world. Think about the testament of the 12 patriarchs. These are the final words and prophecies of the sons of Jacob. Each son gives a warning about a specific vice and a prophecy about a future savior from the line of Levi and Judah. It's a masterpiece of ethical teaching wrapped in prophetic foresight. For the early Christians, this was proof that the entire history of Israel was a signpost pointing toward the Messiah. It was moved to the banned list because it was difficult to verify its origins, but its impact on early Christian ethics was massive. It emphasizes that a prophecy isn't just about seeing the future. It's about seeing the consequences of our current character. Why does the term banned even exist in this context? It's because of the Council of Laodicea and the later Council of Carthage. The men in these councils were looking for apostolic authority. If a book didn't have a clear link to the 12 apostles, it was out. But this was a high bar that ignored the fact that the Spirit was moving through many different voices in the first few centuries. By creating a closed canon, they protected the church from some wild and harmful ideas. Yes, but they also cut off the oxygen to the more mystical and visionary parts of the faith. When we look at the Nag Hammadi library again, we find the letter of Peter to Philip. It's a prophetic dialogue about the fullness of the divine and how the followers of the light should handle the persecution of the world. The prophecy is that the world will always try to dim the light because it doesn't understand it. This isn't a prophecy of doom, but of persistence. It tells the reader that they are travelers in a foreign land and that their true home is a place of absolute peace. This alienation was too much for a church that was starting to get very comfortable in the halls of the Roman government. They didn't want to be travelers. They wanted to be the rulers. So the books that preached a kingdom not of this world were quietly tucked away. The book of Thomas the Contender is another one. It contains a prophecy about the fires of desire and how they consume the soul. It's a very deep psychological prophecy. It tells the reader that if they don't conquer their inner shadows, those shadows will become their reality in the next life. It's a sobering, focused look at self-mastery. Again, the institutional church preferred a system based on confession and absolution rather than inner transformation and mastery. One keeps people coming back to the building, the other makes people independent. You can guess which one the councils preferred, but let's look at the survival story of these texts. It is a miracle in itself. Despite the best efforts of the Roman Empire to burn every copy of the unauthorized scripts, they survived. They survived in the sands of Egypt, the monasteries of Ethiopia, and the caves of the Dead Sea. It's as if the prophecies themselves had a built-in save feature. They knew they weren't for the people of the 4th century. They were for the people who would find them thousands of years later. They were waiting for a time when humanity had matured enough to handle the complex, multi-layered reality of the Spirit. There is a prophecy in the book of Enoch that says, it suggests that these texts were hidden on purpose, to be revealed at a time when the world most needed a deeper, more profound connection to the divine. We are that generation. We are the ones who can look at the Bible and the Apocrypha together to see the full, breathtaking scope of the message. The banned prophecies also challenge our understanding of time. In the Standard Bible, time is often seen as linear, beginning, middle, and end. But in the banned texts, especially the Gnostic ones, time is more like a circle or a series of layers. The prophecy isn't just that something will happen someday. It's that something is happening always in the higher realms. This shifts the focus from waiting for a future event to experiencing a present reality. It's a much more active, vibrant way of looking at faith. It's not just about a ticket to heaven later. It's about heaven as a state of being now. One of the most beautiful banned prophecies is found in the prayer of thanksgiving at the end of some Gnostic scrolls. It's a prophecy of a world where all knowledge is restored and every person recognizes their neighbor as a reflection of the divine. It's a vision of ultimate unity and peace. It was too idealistic for a world of crusades and inquisitions, but for us today, it's a high bar to aim for. It reminds us that the goal of prophecy isn't to scare us, but to show us the potential of what we can become. Many people ask, if these books were inspired, why would the Creator let them be banned? It's a great question, but perhaps the banning was part of the process. Sometimes, you have to hide something for it to be appreciated later. If these books had been part of the Standard Bible for 2,000 years, they might have been analyzed to death, or their mysteries might have been flattened out by centuries of tradition. By being lost and found, they come to us with a freshness and a power that is undeniable. They are like a letter from an ancestor that was found in the attic. It's more precious because it was hidden. The Book of Jubilees is another important banned prophecy. It's often called the Lesser Genesis. It contains a prophecy that the world is divided into jubilees of 49 years each. It's a very mathematical, structured view of history. It predicts exactly when certain events will happen based on a celestial calendar. The early church moved away from this because they didn't want people trying to calculate the day or the hour. They wanted people to focus on being ready at all times. But for the ancient writers, the calendar was a way of showing that the Creator is a God of order, not of chaos. The prophecy of Jubilees is a reminder that there is a rhythm to the universe, and we are part of that music. Then there is the life of Adam and Eve. This contains a prophecy given to Adam before his passing, where he sees the history of the world until the appearance of the water of life. It's a touching, human look at the first family's hope for the future. It's a prophecy of restoration. It reminds us that the story of humanity isn't just a story of falling, but a story of returning. By leaving this out, the Bible focuses more on the legal aspects of the fall, while this text focuses on the emotional and spiritual longing for the Creator. In conclusion, when we look at every banned prophecy from the Bible, we aren't looking at a collection of mistakes. We are looking at a collection of windows that were closed by men who wanted a smaller room. But the horizon is still out there. The Book of Enoch, the Gospel of Thomas, the Apocalypse of Peter. These are all invitations to look further and deeper. They tell us that the spiritual world is more populated, more complex, and more beautiful than we were ever told. They tell us that our individual journey is more important than the institution, and that the end is just a new beginning. By explaining these banned texts, we aren't trying to replace the Bible. We are trying to illuminate it. When you have the full light of all these ancient visions, the words of the prophets in the Standard Bible gain a new vibrance. You start to see the connections and the echoes. You realize that the message of hope, transformation, and the victory of light is a chorus of many voices, some loud and some whispered from the back of a cave. The greatest prophecy of all, found in almost all of these banned texts, is that truth cannot be hidden forever. You can bury it in a jar, you can leave it out of a council meeting, and you can tell people it's forbidden. But like a seed in the ground, it will eventually find a way to the surface. We are living in the time of that revealing. So, take heart. The full story is being told, the missing chapters are being found, and the light is brighter than ever. Stay curious, keep seeking, and remember that the most important prophecy is the one being written in your own life as you move toward the truth. The vault is open. What will you do with what you've found?